Welcome to Radical Self-Forgiveness, a 6-session workshop based on the book Radical Self-Forgiveness, written by author Colin Tipping. I'm Rebecca Harmon, your instructor, and we're on class 5 of this 6-session workshop, so we're almost at the end. My email is listed here on this first slide, Rebecca, RSCP, @gmail.com, and you're always welcome to reach out, ask questions, send comments, communicate with me as you like. So just a quick review again, the handouts, which are the slides with the links in them that you may need, are posted below the video. And you can click on that link and go to a web page where you will be able to download the PDF file that has all of these slides and the links included. The recording I'm doing now is separate from the live class that I teach, as I've talked about in previous sessions, just to protect the privacy of students who show up in class. And again, I am a licensed spiritual practitioner with CSL Greater Pittsburgh, and as such, I'm offering this class, and CSL Greater Pittsburgh is offering this class on a love offering basis. If you're curious what we mean by love offering basis, or that's a new concept to you, there's a link in the handout. You'll see the word love offering, or the term love offering here is hyperlinked. You can go to a page and read about what that means. We are happy to accept any offering or contribution that you would want to make in appreciation for this class, either by check made out to CSL Greater Pittsburgh at the address listed here, or by PayPal. You can go to our site, again, also hyperlinked here, cslgreaterpittsburgh.org, and click on Give to CSL Greater Pittsburgh. Just ask that you indicate that your gift is for the self-forgiveness workshop on any payment that you submit. Thank you. All right, so if we were in the live class right now, I would take questions, comments. We would have a brief discussion about what we covered in the previous week. I hope that if you're following along on this and you have questions, that you're emailing me and that I've answered them for you. If not, please do feel free to reach out. That's what I'm here for. At this point in our class now, I'm going to invite you to participate in a guided meditation. It's a video guided meditation. You can see here the word video is hyperlinked. And so what you'll do is you'll pause this video with me speaking. You'll pause this and go to your handout. If you haven't downloaded the handout yet, you'll want to do that. And then go to slide number 4 and click on the link on the word video there and open that YouTube video. And it'll probably have a brief ad at the beginning. But once that has passed, please go ahead and participate in and enjoy that guided meditation. And we'll follow up on the other side. I'll see you back here after your meditation. Okay, I hope your meditation was helpful, grounding, and that you're ready to move forward. So this week we're going to talk about chapter 8, and the author opens talking about apologies and how they help us to initiate the forgiveness process, and certainly are relevant and important to the self-forgiveness process as well. When we apologize, whether it's to ourselves or to someone else, it very often includes making an amend or some atonement of some kind, making restitution for a wrong or some kind of loss, or repairing some aspect of the relationship that we impacted negatively. The thing that we're apologizing for may require either of those. And the author reminds us that we need to make sure that our apologies are calibrated or in line with the level of the error that we made. So he calls it calibrating them to fit the crime, or being appropriate, and goes on to talk about ordinary apologies in contrast to the radical apology. So let's look at those briefly. In an ordinary apology, we recognize that there was harm done, and we directly communicate with the person we've injured. Now, again, if we're doing self-forgiveness work, we are apologizing to ourselves. But the apology has to come from a place that deeply communicates our real regret, our sorrow about what we did, what we facilitated to cause harm. And it needs to be an appeal for forgiveness and not a manipulation. So what we don't want to do, and what can often happen, is that we try to use the apology to kind of rewrite history. And Colin Tipping is saying that we have to really be careful that we don't enter into this place of apology as a way to manipulate and rewrite the past. When we move over into the radical apology, we still recognize that someone was hurt. And again, we're doing self-forgiveness work. So in this perspective, we're going to recognize that we hurt ourselves. And we're going to recognize that this is something to be sorrowful about. And there will be appropriate guilt attached to this action or these actions that we took that caused harm. We're going to accept responsibility for what happened in worldly and human terms. So, while we talked about in the previous class how there are really no victims and no perpetrators because of this divine agreement ahead of time, I think I also shared that I'm still not sure I fully buy into that. And I also noted that I think in some ways it's a process that the author set up to allow us just to think about things differently. That perspective does not absolve us from understanding the harm that we do on the physical human level. And so when we're making this radical apology, we have to accept that we, in human and worldly terms, have hurt someone. And again, we're doing self forgiveness work. So we have to accept that our actions had real consequences for us in this life here. We still can remain open and receptive to the possibility that a higher purpose was being served in that unfortunate circumstance. And so, in doing both of these things, we're able to see the situation both as a human being, as it impacted us in real life on this earth, in our physical forms, with all our wonderful abilities and limitations. But we're also able to see it from that higher world of spirit. So, what we're being asked to do is integrate both the reality of this physical existence with the higher level spiritual, higher purpose being served perspective. Now, he cautions us that we're not going to communicate that higher purpose if this is an apology going external. Now, this is a workshop focused on self forgiveness, so it's not really an issue. But if you're applying these principles of forgiveness externally to situations where it's between you and someone else, we want to be careful that we don't try to mask our own participation in something that was hurtful to someone else by hiding behind spirituality. And we don't ever want to say to someone else, I know that you're upset that this happened, but it served a higher purpose. That would be inappropriate at any level. If that's our own internal work, and if we want to accept that as we're working on self-forgiveness, that's a whole different issue than trying to communicate that to someone else. And so what we want to make sure that we're not doing is hiding behind spirituality and kind of skirting our responsibility if we're doing forgiveness work with another person. We don't ever want to use spirituality to avoid accountability for what we did, for our part. This is called spiritual bypass. And if you're interested in exploring spiritual bypass, do a Google search. There's a lot of really great information out there, including a lot of work by Jim Lockard, Lockard, and he writes a blog called New Thought Evolutionary, and it's worth the read. We want to make sure that we're using this idea of walking through these things as serving a higher purpose. We want to hold those privately and honor that as a possibility. And when we do, and I alluded to this a couple classes ago, when we consider that it's possible the pain and suffering that we've walked through or the pain and suffering that we've contributed to served a higher purpose, when we're able to consider it from that viewpoint, it raises our vibration. And again, only if we keep it private to ourselves in our consideration, in our meditation, in our private spiritual work. And so recognizing that guilt and shame are low energy vibrations, very low energy vibrations, and that honoring and holding this perspective of the spiritual implications and the lessons that we have to learn. That is a higher vibration. So when we are privately, not shaming someone, not trying to explain our actions away if we're doing forgiveness work with someone else, but if we're just considering this and kind of opening ourselves really to how can this situation be used to improve me and to elevate this whole situation. If we're looking at it from that perspective, how can I learn and grow? How can I better myself? How can I give back more to the world from the lessons I've learned from this experience? The injured party, again, if it's external, will sense and feel this intention of yours, intention of ours, as we're doing this work and connect with it energetically. And then healing will follow in a much more rapid progression. Again, we're doing self forgiveness work. So it's all good because it's all about us and healing ourselves. And, you know, there's a saying that hurt people hurt people. And I like to think that the converse of that is also true, that when we heal, we go out into the world as a healing force. And so as we're thinking about these things and as we're resolving some deep inner stuff, and as we're coming to some conclusions that are more peaceful and allow us to be at peace about situations and circumstances inside of ourselves, we go out into the world as more whole individuals, and we respond to the world from a place of healed wholeness, and that just plants the seeds of healing wherever we go, kind of like fairy dust falling off of us, if you want to think about it in a visual. But healing is the goal here, and if we can heal ourselves and heal the circumstances that brought us to reach out and pick up a book called Radical Self-Forgiveness or tap into a class, then we are doing our part, not only for ourselves, but for everyone that we meet as we move forward. The author goes on to discuss sorrow and regret, and I think all of us are familiar with these two emotions. And it's a very real, it's a very real part of life. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it just is. And Colin Tipping points out that we don't avoid sorrow and regret in radical apologies any more than we would with an ordinary apology. So they're just as real. We have to acknowledge that we feel sorrow because a human being was harmed, whether that human being was us as we're doing our self forgiveness work or if we're applying this to situations outside of ourselves. We want to acknowledge that this sorrow, this deep sorrow and regret opens a door, and the radical apology process really allows us a bridge into the radical forgiveness process. So it's an opening. The the concept of our shadow is it's really important work. And I'm going to reference again Jim Lockard's work on his New Thought Evolutionary blog. He writes a lot about shadow. And there's been more discussion lately in organized spiritual groups about acknowledging the shadow and doing work around the shadow. In the radical forgiveness and the radical apology process, we're working to clear our shadow. And the shadow are deep parts of ourselves, deep aspects of who we are that we very often repress, we push down. Shame is very often tied deeply and wrapped tightly around a lot of our shadow selves. And the radical apology process can work to help bring some of this up and process it, bring it forth and heal it. And we talked about shame a couple classes ago. And clearing out our shadow is important. It's important to healing any shame that we have deep inside of who we are. And clearing out our shadow is so important for us to feel whole and to be whole and to be the healed individuals that we are seeking to show up as in the world. He goes on, the author, to talk about this concept of shadows existing not only in individuals, but in organizations and corporations. and certainly in countries. Now, I think that all of us could look back at history and look at some national incidences that we could easily identify as shadow. So we could look at Germany in the 1930s and see the deep, dark shadow that that country entered into, and we could imagine the deep healing and processing work that had to be done as they came out of that. We could think about Cambodia and the impact of the Khmer Rouge regime and the healing and the shame and the shadow work that has to come out of that um, experience as well. And we could certainly look at the United States at many examples, the way that the Native American populations were treated, the way that minorities in this country have been treated, African Americans certainly at the top of that list, but many other populations as well. We could look at right now immigrants that come to this country. We could look at the way women have had to struggle to fight for equality. We could look at the way that the LGBT community has had to struggle for recognition and equality. And so there's shadow that's beyond the individual, is my point. And I use the examples of not just the United States, but two other world examples to show that this isn't one culture or one group of people. This is a human issue. And Colin Tipping suggests that even though a country's or a nation's shadow is so immense and generally spans generations, it can be healed by individuals. And he talks about this concept of the holograph and how, as each of us raises our vibration, the healing that we experience and that higher level vibration that we begin to exist at impacts the whole world. I think of it as that pebble in the pond. Or there is a recent discussion around if a butterfly flaps its wings in one country, it affects the weather patterns in another country. It's this concept that we're all connected. So there is something that we can do, and this work around our own shadow contributes to the larger healing. So I want to encourage you to read through pages 192 to 193 and do the homework exercise that's listed there on page 193 in the book. Now we're going to move into the Radical Self-Forgiveness Worksheet and take a look at this worksheet in terms of a tool that we can use as we process our own stuff. So I've just put screenshots here of the two worksheets. Here's page 1, and these are available on PDF. And when you go to get your handout, you will see a PDF copy of this worksheet as well. So here we have page 1 and page 2. This is front and back, or 2 pages in the PDF. And if you look along the side here, you can see the 5 stages: telling the story, feeling the feelings, collapsing the story, reframing the story, and integrating the shift. And so what he's done in these worksheets is laid out a step-by-step guide for us. And they're numbered 1, 2A, 2B, etc. And prior to his death, he had workshops where he would teach people how to lead workshops on filling out these worksheets. And the people that learned this, they would call this sheeting. So in that group, it was interesting. Somebody would, you'd be in a conversation with colleagues and friends, and somebody would say something that someone else would recognize as an issue, and they'd say, you need to sheet that. So what we're doing is we're learning this sheeting process that's part of the radical forgiveness and self-forgiveness work. So I've broken these out to look at them a little more closely and want to walk us through this. So telling the story, number 1, 2A, and 2B. And really the best way to do this, in my opinion, is to print this out and write it in pen or pencil. And that way you can print it out as many times as you want and use it over and over. This is not a once and done thing. As we walk through life, we're going to encounter lots of opportunities to work on forgiveness. So in block number 1, we're going to write down, what am I blaming myself for? And what I'm hearing my judging self say to me. So you're just going to write it down. And the sentence he wrote there is, what I am blaming myself for and what I hear my judging self saying to me about it is, okay, 2A. The way I feel about myself with regard to this situation or in general is, and then in parentheses, he says, list your feelings here. So do you feel shame, loathing, guilt, sadness? What do you feel? So write your feelings down there in the block 2A. Then in block 2B, he's asking us, or this worksheet is asking us, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being very low and 10 being very high, assign a value to your self-esteem. Circle one of those numbers or write the number there in that box. Going on to the next level, we're going to go to number 3. And he's asking us to be very truthful. No one's going to see this but us. So question number 3, or statement number 3, I lovingly recognize and accept my feelings and I judge them no more. So are we willing to say that? Do we openly embrace it? Are we open to accepting it but not sure that we're there yet? Or we may be skeptical, like we want to do it but we're skeptical, or we may be at the point where we're just unwilling and we're still at that. And it's whatever it is, it's okay. We need to mark it because we can't walk ourselves through this if we're not honest. So we need to, which one are we? Unwilling, skeptical, open, or willing? Number 4, 4A, I own my feelings. No one can make me feel anything. My feelings are a reflection of how I see the situation. And based on that statement, again, are we willing? Maybe just open? Maybe a little bit skeptical? Or are we still at this point where we're unwilling? I'm going to guess, just a guess. In self-forgiveness work, I think most of us come here at least at the skeptical level. I think if we were unwilling, we probably wouldn't have signed up to read the book or take the class. But it's okay if you are. I'm making an assumption there. All right. So we did an exercise in the previous, I believe it was the previous class, around guilt and shame. And so we want to look at this situation in block number 4B. Regarding this particular situation, I am feeling part guilt or remorse over what I have done, and part shame, remorse over who I am or have become. And we're going to indicate the breakout. So is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? Is it 30-70? Guilt, shame. So we're going to assign proportion to guilt and shame over this issue that we're dealing with. And I think I should have said, but I didn't. When we're doing a sheet, you want to try to hone in on one topic area or one issue. It'll make it easier to deal with. Now, number 5, we want to write about whether our guilt over this issue is appropriate or inappropriate. And remember, we talked about appropriate guilt. We should feel appropriate guilt over something we've done that we should not have done or that we should have thought better of. Inappropriate guilt is when we're feeling guilty over something we had no control over. And we talked about the issue of survivor's guilt being inappropriate guilt. So we want to take some time and just circle one of those, appropriate or inappropriate, and then just write a few sentences about why. And then number 6, block number 6, as I really examine how I feel about myself, I realize that underlying my feeling of shame, there is a belief or a set of beliefs that I hold about myself that are not true. My self-judgments have been based in what others, particularly my parents, but not exclusively parents, saw in me and taught me about myself. For example, then we're going to write down what we want to write down related to that. Moving on to the next step in the radical self-forgiveness process, we move to collapsing the story. And if you see here on the screen, we have statements 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, and we're going to mark these as according to those other blocks: willing, open, skeptical, or unwilling. So number 7, I now realize that what I judge in others represents what I hate about myself and have repressed and projected onto them. Are you willing to accept that? Are you open to accepting it? Are you skeptical or unwilling? Statement number 8. People I dislike are therefore reflecting what I need to love and accept in myself. Mark one of the boxes: willing, open, skeptical, unwilling. Statement number 9. In forgiving myself, I heal myself and I totally recreate my perception of who I am. Are you willing, open, skeptical, or unwilling? Number 10. I now realize that nothing I or anyone else has done is either right or wrong. I drop all judgment. Willing, open, skeptical, or unwilling. Statement number 11. I release the need to blame myself and to be right, and I am willing to see the perfection in what is just the way it is. Are we willing, open, skeptical, or unwilling? Number 13. Even though I don't know why or how, I now see that my soul has created the situation in order that I learn and grow. And again, willing, open, skeptical, or unwilling. Statement number 14. Even though I may not know what, why, or how, I now realize that I, myself, and the others involved have been receiving exactly what we each had subconsciously chosen. And we were doing a healing dance with and for each other. And again, select that you are willing or open or skeptical or unwilling to accept that statement. Number 15. And since we're doing self forgiveness work, we might want to put our name in here. We could even say, I bless myself for being willing to play a part in my own healing, and I honor myself for being willing to play a part in others' healing. Are we willing? Are we open? Are we skeptical? Or are we unwilling? You'll notice on the worksheet that there's space over here to the side. If you are engaged in this and thoughts come to you, feelings come to you, feel free to jot them down. And again, this is a PDF file that you can print multiple times. So the recommendation on these is that once you do a sheet that you destroy them after you've read them over. So don't worry about writing something down and keeping it forever for someone to find. It's something that you can use as a tool and then dispose of when you're done. So let's move on to statement 16 and shift over into reframing the story. Statement number 16, we're going to have to go back and refer to box number 2. So I'm going to just jot back here real quick. Box number 2, when we told the story about the way I feel about myself with regard to this situation. So we're going to go down here. I release from my consciousness all feelings of, and we're going to explain those feelings that we wrote down in box number 2. Box number 17, I completely forgive all those who implanted the ideas in me that I am, and we want to go back to box number 5 and tap into this guilt that we wrote down. So I completely forgive those who implanted the ideas in me that I am guilty about whatever. The people that I am forgiving are, now we're doing self-forgiveness work here, so this should be our name. And then box 18, I now realize that what I was experiencing was a precise reflection of my ignorance of the truth. I now understand that if I were able to see the spiritual big picture, I would really see how it all fits and that everything is indeed perfect. At the same time, I am willing to take responsibility for my actions in this world of humanity. I also understand that the more I act with integrity in this world, with love in my heart, the more likely it is that I will be in alignment with the world of divine truth. I can change my old self destructive reality by simply being willing to see myself in the light of truth. For example, I now see myself as, and you're going to want to write this new vision of yourself there. How you see yourself in perfection. Now we move on to that final step, integrating the shift. Number 19, I completely forgive myself and accept myself as a loving, generous, and creative being. And you can write your name on this line here. I release all need to hold on to any and all ideas of lack and limitation I created in the past. I withdraw my energy from the past and release all barriers against the love and abundance that I know I have in this moment. I create my life and I am empowered to be myself again, to unconditionally love and support myself just the way I am in all my power and magnificence. I suggest you sit with that statement for just a minute before you move on to box 20. Maybe even pause the video and just let that sit with you for a moment. And when you're ready to move on to box number 20. I now surrender to the higher power I think of as, and you're going to enter a word in here like the universe, God, infinite spirit, whatever God means to you, whatever higher power, however that is comfortable for you to express. So I now surrender to the higher power I think of as, and trust in the knowledge that this situation will continue to unfold perfectly and in accordance with divine guidance and spiritual law. I acknowledge my oneness and feel myself totally reconnected with my source. I am restored to my true nature, which is love. And I now restore love to myself and anyone else. I close my eyes in order to feel the love that flows in my life and to feel the joy that comes when the love is felt and expressed. And again, you may want to pause this video and just sit for a moment with that statement. And now moving on to number 21, a note to anyone that I hurt or negatively affected in some way. And this may be a note to ourselves because, again, we're doing self forgiveness work. So you'd write the name of the person here, and it may be your name again. Having done this worksheet, I now realize that there was a divine order to what happened. However, from the perspective of being in this physical world of pain and suffering, I still wish to apologize, to make amends, and ask for your forgiveness. My apology is as follows. And we'll want to use the tools that we learned in chapter 8 about apologies and write an apology to ourselves in this block. Again, you may want to pause the video here before you move on to box number 22. And now, box number 22, a note to myself. And again, we're going to write our name in this space here. I completely forgive you. For now I realize that you did nothing wrong and that everything is in divine order. I acknowledge, accept, and love you unconditionally, just the way that you are. I recognize that I am a spiritual being having a human experience, and I love and support myself in every aspect of my humanness. Now, we talked about doing Louise Hay's mirror work a couple classes ago with the Ho'oponopono statement. This is another wonderful statement to speak to ourselves in the mirror. It's very powerful when you look at yourself in the eye and say, I completely forgive you. Say your name. For I now realize that you did nothing wrong. So, this is a powerful statement that we can say to ourselves in the mirror and harness the power of mirror work with this powerful process of radical self forgiveness. At the bottom there, on a scale of 1 to 10, after doing this worksheet, you're going to rate your self esteem. And it would be interesting if you did this. And, you know, a lot of people who get into this have to do these sheets, even on one issue, a few times. But each time they do the sheet on an issue, a little bit of healing piles up layer after layer. Some things you'll be able to do one sheet on and let go and be healed. Other things, the deeper and the bigger and the more painful, you may have to do a number of sheets. And if you're finding that you're having to do multiple sheets on an issue, you might want to save them until you see some movement on that scale of self-esteem. And then once you get to a place where you're feeling better, you're feeling the healing, you're feeling that restoration, then you can destroy the sheets. You can do it ceremonially if you want to tear it up and burn it. Some people burn it and then put ashes, in a body of water. I'm not recommending polluting, but um, maybe ceremonially in water and then dispose of them appropriately. Whatever makes sense to you, I would encourage you to do in that regard. It kind of helps provide some closure to the process. And so we are now to the end of chapters 8 and chapters 9. And so some work for you this week. Spend some time in chapter 8 thinking about the radical apology process and how it relates to you and your situation, and do some journaling on the self-discovery that you uncover. And then on chapter 9, I would like everyone to do one full sheet on yourself. I want you to do one full sheet. Find some issue that drew you to reaching out and exploring self-forgiveness work. And in the privacy of your own space, in the privacy of your own thoughts, do one complete sheet on that issue. And as you feel so moved, journal about how you feel through and after the process. And we'll see you in the next and last class in this workshop series. And again, my email is available to you. I am here to answer questions and to be a resource for you should you need that. Thank you again. Until next time.